What's up? Welcome to a new episode of Movie Schmovie. This is episode number 329. My name is Steve. I'm one of the co-hosts, and as always, I'm joined by
Ron
and John.
Oh, the enthusiasm, guys! Bringing it hot, Mike.
I'm coming in hot, man.
Oh yeah. Man, I like it. So, how you guys doing?
Pretty good.
Yeah.
How about you?
Good, man. You know. What's this?
What I was doing. I think it was.
You're becoming Cobra Commander.
Destro. Trying to find the root of all words.
I'll kill you, Joe. I love that people that never died in G.I. Joe. It was just like an explosion and then
a parachute.
Yeah, and then you parachuted wherever you were. Normally it was a mountainous area. It didn't make any sense.
Yeah. Also, like Cobra, their design was on point. You know, like all the darker blues and bright reds.
Yeah.
And I believe all of their parachutes were just like white or like light gray. It seems like they would have had a sleeker looking chute design.
No. Super simple.
Yeah.
Sorry about the G.I. Joe rant, Steve.
No, man, it's important stuff. Top of the episode. Get it out now. So this is going to be an interesting episode. Like as I'm laying out and like looking at what we talked about going into it, it's like we're basically talking about some mixture of series. We're talking television series, docuseries across a couple of different platforms. We're going to cover. We got Apple TV Plus. We've got Showtime, and we've got Hulu. And we also have a little HBO Max. Maybe we'll mention a little bit of that, maybe at the top here. But I don't think we've done. It might even be considered like a TV Schmovie. I don't know. What do you think, John? Does it qualify?
I was thinking of this as the "We Need to Talk About ... episode, but since that's slightly glib about a very serious topic that we're going to be talking about, I think that yes, this being a TV, or it could be TV Schmovie, and we'll have to pull the number, whatever, because we did number the TV Schmovie.
Yeah.
But TV Schmovie : we have to talk about, you know, Cosby, Pam and Tommy, and Euphoria or whatever. But no, I think that's This is kind of a TV Schmovie. If listeners are new to the show. They don't know about that we used to sort of designate episodes that.
Yeah. I mean, we kind of spread it all over the place the last couple episodes here, and like beyond the prior one, we talked mainly about Scream, but like, you know, all these catch-ups, or we're just talking about everything we've been watching. But this is kind of unique because this week, our little checklist that we have, like mostly all of it, if not all of it, really is different versions of a television series, docuseries, something like that. So, which I thought was really cool because, you know, most of these, you know, I guess with the exception of the Cosby doc, I think, is that all coming out at one time, or is that a weekly drop?
That I'm not sure.
Man?
I think After Party is a weekly drop after the first three that I think come out at once. Is that what they're doing?
I was going to say After Party, Pam and Tommy are both first three and then weekly. And I wasn't sure about the Cosby series, and obviously Euphoria is doing weekly drops.
Yeah.
But it's the kind of thing where, like, you know, there's a bit of a entry point into some of these series where you get to like load up on what the story is going to be about, and you know, if any of them that we discuss really interest you, you really can find them this weekend, you know, in their entirety possibly, but at least, you know, with the first, even with the Euphoria, if you're jumping in now, you've got 3 episodes of the second season queued up waiting if you're behind. But yeah, Pam and Tommy and After Party both start off with the first 3 episodes.
Looks like we need to talk about Bill Cosby is going to be. We need to talk about Cosby. It's going to be weekly, though.
It is weekly, okay.
Yeah, which is cool because it looks like they're trying to create a conversation around this, kind of along the lines of the R. Kelly doc, and which took the internet and by storm. You know, it was a jarring look at this man. And
the one I kept thinking of was the Michael Jackson doc.
That one too.
Yeah, the Neverland.
That one too.
Yeah, it does some formal things that we'll talk about that are different from the style of that, obviously. But just as far as like, here is a, you know, that was a 2-week thing, right? But it was something where they split it up and kind of, I think you're right, kind of tried to create a little bit of time to react and respond to it, and then finish it up, and that became incredibly divisive once it was out. I wonder what the feedback to we need to talk about Cosby is going to be, because I do think there's still room for some people to say that it is biased in some way, but I think it goes out of its way to try to present a spectrum of opinions, about that guy. So
yeah. You want to start light first? I feel like
Yes.
we're gonna get into the heavy.
Yeah.
So let's go. Let's not get into drug abuse yet. Let's talk about a murder. Let's talk about a murder.
Our lightest topic of the night, maybe.
Let's talk about murder and
sex tapes are a lighter topic.
Yeah,
maybe.
yeah.
But the way that the show is maybe heavy. So yes, let's talk a little bit about the After Party, which is sort of I was thinking of it as kind of a Lord and Miller project, but it's really more of a Miller project with Lord kind of just lurking about. But that's sort of that's the pedigree of this one, right? I mean, that's the reason why one would be excited about this one, would be the team behind it and the
cast.
The cast is incredible, yes. But that cast working with creators that have such a conceptual handle on things, and usually like a really smart, funny way around an idea. There was reason to be very hopeful about the After Party. I know when we last talked about it, we had all agreed that the first episode is a little bit underwhelming, and Steve was saying he enjoyed it, but was not as hyped on it as he thought it'd be. Where are we now that we've seen some more episodes of the After Party?
I was a pretty big fan of it. Now there's a term that gets thrown around willy-nilly in the industry, and that's genre bending. This truly is a genre bending.
What about the term willy-nilly?
I thought the term was willy-nilly.
Yeah.
Willy-nilly.
And the whole podcast, we're pivoting. The whole podcast is going to be exploring that phrase.
You know what gets thrown around willy-nilly? What? Willy-nilly.
Willy-nilly. And genre bending. And, you know what gets thrown around. So it's like, but yeah, truly, man, like this is one of those shows that, it's not perfect by any means, but if you want to experience something that feels very unique, especially with the kind of whodunit dramas that exist in the world, I think After Party's a good palate cleanser, especially if you want some comedy involved. If somebody's looking for something fun to watch, this will probably be the one that I suggest, even though that it's about murder. I very much enjoyed after the first episode, because the first episode was very dry, very unassuming, and I thought it was going to kind of fall flat on his face. But
you feel like even knowing I think maybe some people aren't aware of like what the format of the show is going into it, but I mean, I had read about it prior to that, so even kind of knowing that the episodes were breaking out as like different characters being interrogated and like what their story is of this night, where one of their friends has died after a high school reunion. Even knowing that after the pilot, I just felt like the pilot, especially because the pilot focuses on Sam Richardson's character, who, among this amazing cast, he's probably one of my favorites of the cast. Yeah. Which was kind of a little surprising to me, but then getting a few more episodes into the season, that character really kind of gets fleshed out and comes more alive, that I felt was a little dry in that first episode. Kind of seeing how the other stories coming through and how they view what his character's doing in the background of their story. It all kind of comes together really well, and it's really quite funny. But I haven't seen probably as much as you guys have watched. I've only actually watched the first 3 episodes, just the ones that are coming out this week. And I kind of love, how different the episodes feel, and I think going from, the first 3 episodes kind of focus on Sam Richardson's character, Ike Barinholtz, and Ben Schwartz's characters.
Yes.
So, yeah. So I think the way that they kind of, each of them kind of, you say genre bending, it really literally is that, where like each of these episodes, each of these characters are kind of living inside of like their own version of their maybe their favorite kind of movie, or a favorite kind of show. You have these rom-coms, you have action movies, and you have like these very modern musicals with very hip pop songs, and the fact that you get to kind of follow that even through the points that I'm there with episode 3, I really like that about the show. And I really like how, each episode not only focuses on a character or the actor or actress that, is like just a great part of an ensemble cast, but I really thought it was kind of smart to kind of make each episode feel like a different genre of living inside of a murder mystery kind of thing. And yeah, I'm very excited to watch more episodes. I'm probably going to watch it. I've kind of found this thing. I don't know if you guys can relate to this. I kind of have like backed myself into a corner a little bit with some of these shows that we get early access to.
Yes.
Where like I consume it all, but then they don't let us see the finale until like when it airs or like the week of its airing. Like I felt that way about Peacemaker, and I kind of like I had seen at one point the finale of this was available to us, but I think it's since been pulled from the app. So like I'm deciding whether I consume these shows all up front or not, because it kills me to wait. The same thing happened with Only Murders in the Building. Like I watched it all and it was like, oh my God, like a month and a half from now, I gotta wait and go back and be as excited about this finale. But so yeah, with this one, I might kind of space it out and watch it, as they air to kind of keep current with what people are talking about. But yeah, in general, this is like a really cool show. And I mean, Lord and Miller, like you said, John, even though only like really it's like half of them doing this one in terms of directing, but the cast is great. I find it to be actually really funny. And even without seeing, probably 3 or the 4 episodes that we do have access to, but I just feel like, starting that off, like Sam Richardson, Ike Barinholtz, and Ben Schwartz as the first 3 focus, like those are like, I love all 3 of those people, and then that's not even getting into Ilana Glazer or like, who else, more with Dave Franco or Tiffany Haddish, and what's the other detective's name? John
Early.
John Early, like
from Search Party.
Yes,
and he's like
just an amazing cast, man.
He's
just
like one
so
of the
engaging.
best. He's like almost like a modern version of an old-fashioned sitcom star, where it's like, here's a person that's like heightened at all times, but like an expert line deliverer. He is so good at like the delivery, and the way this character on the After Party is a little bit more dopey than his kind of scenester guy that he plays on the Search Party show. But like, it's funny that's After Party and Search Party, and I probably will slip up at some point and call one show the other thing. But I just want to double back. I think we all are feeling largely the same way on this one. This is fun, and it does have a lot of thought that goes into it. And that first episode, it's like, it's a little laborious. It over-explains this idea that I think we all already have, but maybe the show does need to lay it out. But it over-explains a little bit this idea that we're all the main character in our own movie, is what people say, and so if you take that as the concept, it's a familiar idea to many murder mysteries or just different movies over the years, where they've said we're going to get into different accounts and see how they differ, or at least crime stories have taken that approach before. But doing it with the comic verve and with the idea that it's actually going to be in the genre, like shot and like staged in the style of the genre, and that when the episode starts, it reminds me of watching Community, how sometimes it would just be like, you would be able to tell within a couple minutes what kind of genre pastiche you were getting and like what world you were in. Oh, this is an action movie. Oh, this is a cop movie. And that show did that a lot over the years. And I think this show has some of that similar DNA to it. It's going to be smart. It's going to have, what's cool is this sort of very modern, very young cast. Now they're kind of comedy vets, a lot of them, but they are skewing younger. Like we're going down from people, the different generations of comedy stars, come along and then they become kind of middle aged. And I do feel like this is like a bunch of relatively fresh faces that it's still fun to see do something of this scale. And Ben Schwartz is just like especially once it really gets going with him and Sam Richardson, their interplay together is really funny. And I think it is interesting what you say about Sam Richardson. He's kind of been like a secret weapon in comedies for a while, and now that he's been in the center of a few things, I do think it takes a minute maybe for people to figure out how to use him when he's delivering more than just a few lines, because he has kind of a funny, fussy comic energy that even when he's playing a regular guy, he's a little bit uptight. He's just like any comedy actor, that you plug them in and their natural tendencies have to become kind of part of the joke. I really think as this show goes on and you get more background on how he ended up in the state he was when we kind of meet him at the beginning of this, the humor of that becomes increased, and also the fact that he starts off with all this marker stuff drawn on his face, and it kind of slowly fades over what we're seeing, but he's got like a little kitty nose still in most of his scenes. I just think that's a very funny touch, and I think he really is like increasingly good as the shows go on, especially as you see how in everybody's account, everybody's acting a little different than they do. And it's like everybody has a different view of everybody. And so in one episode, a character will come off very pushy and like they're gregarious. And another episode, if we're getting that person's point of view, they're presented much more even-handedly or whatever. So I think that all that stuff is funny and well done. And I think Ike Barinholtz's episode has that scene at the urinals that's one of the stupidest things I've ever seen, but it had me laughing pretty hard. I don't know. I just think
funny,
that,
dude.
Yeah, I think it just hits on a lot of levels once it gets going. And you're right, Steve. The next episode you'll see is, I guess this is, hopefully we're not killing things, but it's Lana Glazer's episode, and you go into a deeper, different part of the story that you really haven't seen anything about, and they still have room to grow. There's, I think, 8 episodes in the season, so. I'm pretty hooked. But I kind of did the same thing you did, Steve. I put the brakes on after watching 4 of them. That I was just like, I kind of want to sit down and savor this because it does feel like one that maybe binging, you just might miss some of the kind of cleverness of it if you're rushing. I definitely think it's drafting on the kind of success, you might call it, of Only Murders in the Building at this point. Like the opening theme music and opening sequence, it might be totally coincidental, but it totally feels like it knows, we are now in the kind of genre of this. People are liking this now. So it might just be one of those times where different studios produce 2 things that are kind of similar in their spirit. But this idea of kind of a lighthearted murder mystery that blends like the modern sitcom style with, that kind of involved story where you actually are wondering it's a solid whodunit in some cases. Yeah. And so I think, I am interested to know just what happened, as well as I'm interested to see what kind of jokes and genre stuff comes from it. So
cool.
I really loved Ben Schwartz's the first song in his episode about how you only get your one shot twice or something like that. It was just really funny and catchy. And actually, I felt like, what is this making me think? And I was like, this is almost like Flight of the Conchords level. Like I would listen to this song isolated from this show and enjoy the sort of the conceit of the song. This idea of getting one shot twice,
And then Hamilton.
I was thinking Hamilton.
Oh, right. But I'm just saying, like, as far as like the level of the comedy and the joke writing within the lyrics, it's like it's that good of a pastiche that it works as kind of a standalone song. Plus, if you follow Benny Schwartz, he loves to sing, and like it really feels like a perfect way to use him. And like I said, his scenes with Sam Richardson as they get into the kind of more mystery caper, the stuff they're doing in the house to try to listen in and stuff. That stuff is just really stupid and fun.
It's so funny. So funny.
It is, man.
So that comes out today. If you listen to the podcast on Friday, drops on Apple TV Plus. The first 3 episodes of the After Party is available if you're on there. What do you guys want to jump into next?
Well, you guys have watched Euphoria, and I have not caught up on that yet. But we could maybe devote.
I'm not
a little
on
time.
season 2, but I just started season 1, and I'm on.
Yeah, like I had mentioned
6.
like on our thread that like I was curious if either of you were up to date on Euphoria because I kind of like had fallen behind for the second season, but I caught up this week, and and Ronald, you kind of like took it as a note to like let's get started. You jumped into it.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of things are clicking with me and my perception of Zendaya.
I think it's Zendaya.
Zendaya's performance in general. And everything I've seen her in has always been good, even from the kids shows that she's been into to now. But I think what's happened is, this is hard, man, and I have bias when it comes to like kid actors. Like I think it took me a while,
like the Disney kid actor style of acting.
Yeah, it took me a while to start taking her seriously in that way because I remember her when she was I remember her way before all that stuff. So like when everybody's like, oh my God, I remember her from all like goofy kid stuff. So like it took me a while to see her as an adult. And then once I did, I really started to pay attention to the stuff that she's done. And I saw, the John David Washington movie that she did with the producers of Euphoria. So I'm like, this is stylized and beautiful and all this stuff. If one more person talks about this, I'm going to have to check out Euphoria. Lo and behold, Steve I didn't know that he was a Euphoria guy. And I gave it a watch, man. It's like Kids on steroids. And I mean, for anybody that doesn't know, Kids is like a movie that came out in the 90s with a bunch of relatively unknown actors and actresses, Chloe Sevigny, uh, Rosario Dawson, a couple others. And it was about kids that got in trouble, which was crazy. And it had an awful ending. But Euphoria lets you know that kids are into very different things than they were when we were younger. It is a different world. We're dealing with different things. And you know how people say nothing's new under the sun? Stupid people say that because that's not true. There are many new things under the sun. They're always being reinvented. There's new stuff all the time. It's, in fact, I found out about it so much through Euphoria and other things like happenstance, talking to friends of, all of our friends have, some of them, if they had kids in, in high school or after, have like teenagers or 20-year-olds or 21, 23, 24, depending on, when they had a kid. So it's interesting to really hear and see the things that kids have to deal with now versus what we had to do. John, if you slipped on something and fell down, if I slipped and fell down, Steve, if you slipped and fell down, that would be it. But here, they'd play it. They'd have some music behind it. They'd have you fall down into a pit in the hell. They'd have a hashtag for you. They'd have signs for you when you came. You'd be made into a meme. It's just a different world that we live in. And Euphoria does a really cool job of bridging the gap in a cool way. So I'm hooked, man. And I hate that you got me hooked on this show. I'm hooked.
Yeah, I feel like, it's Euphoria is like a weird thing because I remember watching the show, like it kind of got, the COVID kind of screwed up the whole trajectory of this show among many other shows, obviously. Right. But this was a show that like kind of gained a lot of steam during its first season. Right. And then that in between, Zendaya like goes and wins an Emmy for this show. And like, it's kind of, being delayed a whole year. They had a couple episodes come out that were like special episodes about Rue and Jules, like kind of where they were in between these two seasons, which I thought actually were really good and interesting. But it was really kind of contained, focused on them, obviously shot during COVID and things like that. They were kind of like therapy sessions for the two characters to kind of bridging the two seasons. So yeah, again, like, kind of coming late to season 2 a little bit, being able to watch the first 3 episodes was nice, kind of just catching up and reminding me where all these characters were that I feel like it's been like 2 years, plus. But yeah, like, I think, I remember seeing that film Assassination Nation that Sam Levinson did a couple years ago, and it's hyper stylized. That's one of the things I mentioned, on our thread that like kind of turned some people off from the show. And it's probably some of its biggest criticism is just kind of like style over substance in some ways. But I think that personally that the show has enough of a large cast, different kinds of actors, different kinds of characters, even in some version of a high school world that I have no relation to anymore. You know what I mean? Like what this looks like on, in this town with these people and what these people look like, what they do, where they come from, their backstories. It's not so relatable for me, but just as a slice of what a high school life probably does look like in some places, and this day and age, like you said, the impact of social media and like what it means to, a teenager's day-to-day life. And, it's just kind of crazy to think about that. But catching up on the show was great because, I mean, again, I get to jump in and see these characters that I love, especially Rue. Zendaya is just amazing. I love her. Amazing. I didn't love Malcolm and Marie like as a movie, but I thought she was phenomenal in it. Sam Levinson also did that with John David Washington. But it's just like one of these auteur shows where like the credits pop and it's like written, directed, produced, executive produced, Sam Levinson. Like this is his show. So it's like you kind of like that style of writing and the look of the show, because it does look a lot like Assassination Nation, and even some pieces of the way that Malcolm and Marie are shot. It's got a lot of that. But I really love this show. I mean, like, again, it's mainly around the cast and around like just the kind of the paths that these characters go down, however dramatic they are. There's a lot of characters that I really liked in season 1 that seem to be getting more attention in season 2. Like you were mentioning, Fezco and or Ashtray, like the two drug dealers from season
So
one.
good.
They definitely kind of are more prominent, at least in the first 3 episodes so far. But it's like one of those heartbreaking things to see, like a character like Rue, who you just like, you love and you want to root for, but they just can't get out of their own way. And no matter how much like support and people that prop them up and try to make them succeed, it's like just tragic, and you can kind of already see some of those pieces coming together for this season, unfortunately. But yeah, I mean, this is a great show. Like week over week, it seems like it's gaining more steam as the season's rolling along. Just a beautiful cast. I think it's a beautifully shot show. I'm kind of a sucker for the way it looks. I mean, like I love how quote unquote slick it is. But yeah, I don't know. That's the HBO. That's the HBO proper. It's on HBO Max, obviously, but it's an HBO Sunday. You know how they got that Sunday lockdown going. It's one of their Sunday shows. But so far, season 3 is great. I can't wait to see this weekend's episode. But yeah, Euphoria is on Sunday night.
Yeah, we'll follow up once we've all caught up on the whole thing, because it definitely has intrigued me. And I don't know, whatever it is about the content, it seems intense or heavy or something. But the more I hear about it, I realize that there's all kinds of stuff going on with this show that is I don't know. It seemed kind of grim to me when I first started seeing it. But I think it might sound more. It's got more of a cast of characters than I realized, and that a lot of times that's the heart of a good show. I know that sounds obvious, but just a show with like especially HBO, you can every now and then end up with something where you're kind of watching it going, I can't believe they've got this much going on, under the hood in a show. So
yeah. Why don't you guys want to get into the Cosby series?
Yeah, we really should. This is a difficult subject and a difficult thing to watch in some ways. And I also thought, though, it was really cathartic, might be a strong word to use, but definitely something that made me feel like, oh, I've been able to, there's a pressure release valve that we have around Bill Cosby in this culture. And if you go back to when we were talking about, maybe it was documentaries or nonfiction movies or something, that one of my picks at some point was Bill Cosby himself, the comedy film, the famous Bill Cosby. I believe it was an HBO thing, but at least that's where I saw it, and that's where we taped it when I was a kid, and where we watched that tape until it wore out, and everyone in the house knew all of his routines by heart. And of course, then the Cosby Show came out and used that material. So that was like when he went into this period of being kind of America's dad, and for all the good he did in his career and all the good he did for people, obviously we know that he's also accused of drugging and raping upwards of 60 women.
Yeah. And
I mean, this is a very difficult thing to try to absorb about any one person, but especially someone who had such a specific impact, and especially for what his career and his life meant to black people. I think this documentary, the series, it's a 4-hour documentary, essentially split up over 4 episodes by W. Kamau Bell. It really tries to tackle all the stuff that I just said. So if you're wanting to have that conversation or wanting to just see people hash these things out in a way that might satisfy you on some philosophical level, just that this conversation is happening, I think this show really does all of that and more. But yeah, it's a ride. It definitely will take you through some pretty dark emotions. How did you react to this, Ronald?
I mean, it was really emotional. I mean, my wife was in tears. She and lots of our friends went to historically black colleges solely because of Cosby Show in a Different World. Now, one thing that documentaries do, I don't like most documentaries. I have to be completely honest. But what they do sometimes is they scrape the information. It's kind of like an aggregator. And they get like lots of things that you haven't connected with each other, and tries to connect them in a way that, you may not have remembered that you heard about 20 people during the course of your, however long you've been alive, or, you may not remember that you heard about 15 people, 20 people, or even 40 people during the course of our lives. But you probably have heard about at least 20 of his victims during the course of your adult life, right? And to hear these stories, and, I've been kind of unpeeling sort of whatever masculinity is over the last couple years. And look, at the beginning of the podcast, we have said and done things that are very different than we would do now.
Yes.
But that's different than what I'd been exposed to when hearing about some of the Cosby stuff. Because like some of it is like jokingly the way that we talk about like attractiveness of a person, right? Versus people creating equations of people's trauma. Like being like, you know, they were in this place, so they did this, so they deserve this thing, right? And that's something I've never had in my vocabulary. I've never had it in my psyche because my parents kind of laid it out for me pretty early that like, you know, there are most people that are victims of this, all of them are undeserving. You know, like let's just say all. Like there's no one deserves this sort of treatment at all. Ever in this lifetime deserves what happened to them, right? And so because of that, you know, I've always been on the side of these women. And I know a lot of people around me, and it's not anybody in this conversation that I know will take from this that like it's a setup. It's a conspiracy. I don't understand why this is happening. But I know a lot of people also that will see this information and say, man, I never thought about all this stuff together. And there are, like, people thought that it was just white women. There are some black women in this equation. There are some Asian women in this equation. There are people of all race, shapes, and sizes throughout 50 years or so that have been victimized. So when you see all that stuff kind of aggregated together, with also some, believe it or not, there's balance in it, of them kind of being like, this is what he contributed to the industry. This is what he contributed for black arts, to cinema, to all these cool, amazing things, does not negate that he's done these things. So people have to kind of get out of their heads of emotion of how much you love a person versus what they're capable of. Those are two totally different things. And that conflation sometimes can get very nasty and weird, and people say things publicly that they may not age well. And it messed me up, man. It honestly messed me up. And I could tell that by talking to you, John, that you had a similar sort of feeling.
Yeah. I mean, that we all were sort of complicit in, like, buying into the myth around this guy. You know what I mean? The idea that what he had created around himself was definitely sort of a distortion field around some of the things he was doing. And of course, it sounds from all accounts, there were people that were close to him that knew what was going on or knew some degree of what was going on all along. And there was some hush-hush. There was a lot of stuff on the sets he worked on that was like, oh, maybe that people witnessed some of the stories that you hear, and some of the women have accounts that clearly there were other people involved and witnesses, but maybe nobody was putting it all together. Maybe nobody was really accounting for it, or maybe we just were a little bit more under the spell of the idea of the sort of great man, you know, the genius that we put up with. And I think that we've talked about this in a lot of different ways. And recently this Joss Whedon story that ran, that people probably either read or heard people talking about, had a similar effect, a different quality of like what he's being accused of. But just these narcissistic men, they set themselves up for such success in our hearts and minds because part of what they do is capitalize on the effect they have, the way that they can galvanize us, the things they do that are legitimately good or great or smart or whatever, or humanistic or whatever it is that attracts you to an artist. And then, of course, Bill Cosby giving millions of dollars to some of the colleges you're talking about, Ronald, and like just being this inspirational sort of figure. And we all felt it curdle a little bit, though, when he kind of became the spokesman for the right way to live. Like, I remember when he started giving those speeches where he would talk about pull up your pants and start speaking English and all that kind of trash. And it's like, I remember when the culture kind of bent away from him a little bit. It was, you know, the documentary addresses that. It also addresses Eddie Murphy's famous routine, you know, tell Bill to have a Coke and a smile and shut up, or shut the fuck up. don't know why I edited that. But I mean, like, we all quoted that line. We all know that was in the early 80s, mid 80s, that Eddie Murphy was making this comment, that this guy was kind of a hypocrite. So I think it's like, when I mentioned Joss Whedon, I think that it's the hypocrisy that really bugs us about some of these people that puffed themselves up because they had different degrees. And I'm not saying it's a hypocrisy that bugs us more than the rape. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that, like, I think what really strikes fears, like, in our hearts about just believing in anybody anymore is the fact that this malignant narcissism can make someone, like, even better at winning your heart and getting in your mind and everything. And it's the very thing they're going to weaponize against people to do these horrible acts. And in the case of Bill Cosby, they say it in the doc too, but I was thinking it before this point gets made. If we know about upwards of 60, we can just about double or maybe even triple that number over 50 years and say there were a lot of women who just woke up feeling like, what did I drink? And don't have any memory of the night, or people who don't want to come forward. So I think that this idea of listening to victims so that people aren't afraid to come forward, to me, that's always been a very clear line that we can draw, that we can just say we're going to that doesn't mean that we take every account that every person speaks out as that's the absolute gospel truth. It doesn't mean that you need 60 women, though, in order to have the tide turn against someone either. You know what I mean? Like, there's so much, and it's all uneasy, and it's all kind of unresolved, and anything we say right now is we're just kind of hashing through things that this documentary actually addresses. And I think that's what impressed me so much about it, was that it really manages to address a lot of the concerns you might have. And in that way, it's different from the Finding Neverland thing, because that was very pointedly a choice was made from the documentarians to say, we're going to focus on the victims' accounts and we're not going to introduce any other information. But this, because it's more people that are talking after the fact, you get people's opinions about, you get some people saying, it took me a while before I realized I should believe these women. It took me a while before I realized my personal experience with Bill Cosby didn't override this. And some of that you might say, I can't believe that person admitted that they knew about some of this and they still love the guy. But then I go, you know what? I like how honest this documentary is, because there is this cultural attachment to him. And the documentary is not afraid to point out that, like, there's a suspicion on the behalf of all black people anytime a lot of white women accuse a black man of rape or of sexual impropriety of some sort. There's like a cultural reaction against that, because that was used in the past so nefariously by law, but people in the law that were trying to peg people and, like, we're going to pin this on you, So it's like, I like that it addressed that too, because you always have to account for that, how race in America is this completely fucked up thing, and how even someone like Bill Cosby is not immune to that racism even in this, this culture that claims it's a meritocracy. It reveals itself to really be more corrupt than that all the time. So I don't know. I think that there's something very American about this documentary, and that it addresses something, racism in America. It's part of our story, and race can't be separated from almost anything in America if you're really being honest about it. Right. So I think that, I don't know, to me this just felt like I said, I've been kind of dancing around calling it like good or entertaining or enjoyable, but I do think satisfying or cathartic. It did leave me. I mean, I was kind of a wreck when this thing was over, and I was really looking forward to getting a chance to kind of at least vent with somebody about it. I want to add one little thing though, Ronald, and this is just kind of a note that I had in my head. He seemed like such a control freak, and maybe increasingly in his own little world. Like you get the idea that he just doesn't permit anybody telling him anything, but that he doesn't want to hear. You know what I mean?
Yes.
There's a show. They're talking about how NBC was talking with him about doing a new show when all this hit, and then that deal fell apart. And I thought to myself, what kind of a nightmare would it have been for any producers to work with him on a new sitcom in whatever year it would have been. But it's like, imagine how controlling and out of touch he would have been, and probably monstrous he would have been, even just on set. He really seems like a very imperious guy, and there is something kind of intimidating about him. Throughout the doc, I'm reminded that whole America's Dad thing, it wasn't just because he was cuddly that we called him that. It was also because when he got that serious face and kind of leaned in, you felt like, oh shit,
yeah,
I'm about to get blasted, So I can't imagine what working with him and giving him notes on his performance or his ideas would be like.
It's the nightmare. So Aaron graduated from Hampton University in 2000. Well, I should say a year. I don't want to.
Yeah.
2000 something. Cosby spoke at her graduation, and his speech was, I basically was like, I'm worried about you guys. So I met Aaron 8 years ago. One of our first dates, she talked about how it destroyed her to have a graduation where you have fought to get to the end and you have a bachelor's degree, and a man gets up and shits on you for 45 minutes straight, telling you how awful you are, you're going to get pregnant early, you're going to get the drugs, you're having premarital sex. It's like something is wrong with, and I know that some of that comes from losing his son under horrible circumstances, right? But maybe he should have gotten some therapy about that. Maybe he should have bounced some of that stuff with a therapist instead of trying to talk it out on stage and making these like harsh assumptions about large groups of people that just aren't true on the whole. Like it just poor assessments of Black people.
At a pivotal moment in their lives, too.
At a pivotal moment. And then he kept doing it. And he went on like a tour, man. So there was a moment in the documentary that sat with me so hard that maybe won't affect everybody the same way. But you got to understand what somebody being victimized by him means. Or anyone that's a victim of a sexual assault feels like. The lack of sympathy is just heavy, man. People just doubt if you've been assaulted. That is the surface level, right? And I've noticed that your proximity to the victim truly defines how you feel about it. But it should never be like that. Chris Spencer, a comedian who used to host a late night show Vibe, from the 90s, I'm showing my age. Chris Spencer is talking, and he brings up that he golfs with Beverly Johnson. And Beverly Johnson, he believed Bill Cosby up until this point. But then when he heard her talk, it hit him. A switch went off. And I don't want, and why I'm saying that is I hope and pray that no one on this earth has to go through a situation where you have a switch go off in your head because of proximity to you know what I mean? Like I want everybody to just know that if somebody had the bravery to say that they've been victimized, that they've been victimized. Just assume that they've been victimized. Don't try to do any you're not an investigator, you aren't a detective. Fucking take people for their word, especially adults. You know, like it's fucking crazy, man. Like, and kids. I mean, obviously anybody, but like it is infuriating to hear the way that people talk about victimhood and.
Well, I mean, people always act like the knee-jerk reaction that there's some immediate gain that you would get from it. And if you actually look at the story of someone who's gone through it, you realize that someone would have to be pathological to crave that kind of attention and to actually get something positive from it. Because your life gets turned inside out and people take sides against you. And a lot of people want to come at you and say, well, come on. Like you said, in this case, what were you doing going there? Why were you with him? You'd heard the stories. Why did you take those pills? I mean, because frequently he's giving someone a pill they think is going to like give them a buzz, not a pill they think is going to knock them out, you know? Yeah. And again, it's not to say that, like there's a pretty good point made in this thing about rape drugs. There's a chemist, I think, who says, there are rape drugs. There are drugs people can put in your drink that can knock you out and make you extremely susceptible and very vulnerable. But that he said the worst thing in that situation is that you're with a rapist. He said it's not a drug that makes you get raped. It's, the alcohol is as big of a problem as anything with regards to this kind of stuff. A lot of sexual assault happens when people are drunk. So like blaming the drugs or focusing on the rape drug gives people kind of an easy thing to say, well, we've got to watch and make sure someone doesn't slip something into your drink. Right. Make sure someone doesn't, hand you a drink that you didn't see them pour, that kind of thing. But realistically, it's like, and also just, Like, you can't victim blame in this situation. It's like you really just have to look at young men and say, don't rape. Stop rape. There's no way to do that, though. I mean, obviously, this is a problem that's been going on forever, and it's just so sad. And the accounts, if the women in this doc, when they tell their stories, it really slows down and lets them tell their stories. You get the sense that some of them don't want to relive it on camera, and some of them do. And I think it does a nice way of. It's very tastefully done, the way that it mixes in some people's accounts, and other people, they talk about other issues around it. But you don't feel like it's just hitting you over and over again with these horrible, horrible stories. But you do have to hear a few of them kind of in detail to understand the scope of what he was doing. And I will say also, remember how in I'll Be Gone in the Dark, how there was a lot of focus on like survivors and maybe even the lives of people who've picked them up. And there was an older couple that had been a victim of this, and they obviously their relationship had held strong. So many of these people have relationships that fall apart, or their lives are very troubled. There was a very similar vibe to the way this documentary treated the victims that were speaking, which is to say, they were given space was given for them just to talk about their human experience beyond the thing that happened to them. And there's one in particular who we get to see that kind of relationship with a spouse that is the kind of thing that might save someone or give someone the strength or help them find the strength to carry on. There was do you know the scene I'm talking about, Ronald, where it's
man,
and it just made me think, thank God people have people in their lives. I know that's such a broad thought, but I just was like, again, it's hard to say you can find a ray of sunshine in this thing, but seeing that some of these people have support or are able just to be strong enough and kind of pick themselves up and put themselves back together. But particularly that scene where there's a woman who, one of the victims whose husband, you see what a role he played in like encouraging her to tell her story and to stand by her. It kind of brings it home in a different way.
Yeah, the hurt in his eyes, just believe people, man. If they say that they've been assaulted, just believe them. I cannot stress that enough. It's a heavy duty documentary with a lot of nuance, and that scene that John is talking about is the icing on the cake. You need a good support system, and you need people that believe you. And you need people around you that will let you know that this thing won't define you as a person.
Right.
And I feel like without the proper help, I could see something like that just breaking someone, Mm-hmm. If you have the stamina, I know, because it's like it is truly, it's a thing of stamina. If you could stomach this, I'd say give it a watch. It is powerful, and it really gives you some perspective. There's literally new information in this documentary that's nowhere else. Cool little factoids about him that really it's interesting, man. It's interesting.
And it will make it hurt again too, because you do get, especially in the first episode, it reminds the shit out of you. I don't know if you can use that.
Oh yeah, I know what you're saying.
But like it reminds you of it. It's not afraid to remind you of all the stuff we thought was great about this guy, and like it does make you realize how. I mean, again, it's like I said before. It's like you're realizing, oh shit, the thing that made him so cool is part of what made him able to do this. Like even when he was donating millions to colleges and he was doing all this important stuff that was very humanitarian in its nature, he was in some way he was puffing up his own legend when he was doing that. So it's very hard. I mean, it's not to say that people shouldn't still feel the benefit of what he's done that was good, but it's very hard to like see that as like a pure benefit. Now you look at now him and go, okay, maybe there was some narcissistic need he was feeding in himself, in addition to doing things that were helpful, but it just makes the whole thing feel tainted in some very sad way. Yeah. That like it still doesn't erase the good that came from it, but it just complicates things. Yeah, it's very sad, and I think if we haven't turned you off from watching it with all this kind of heavy talk, I do think like Ronald said, it's the kind of thing that you should probably make some time for, because there's probably not a person listening that doesn't have some meaning in their mind attached to Bill Cosby. Maybe if you're younger, you don't understand just how huge the guy was. But this will give you, like, it will actually mention the time when he had a cartoon on Saturday morning. He was on every commercial. He was like doing Kodak and Jell-O and Coca-Cola, and also had one of the biggest sitcoms in the world that ran for 8 years or whatever. So he was everywhere.
And I hope that I know that my wording probably wasn't perfect at all on any level, but I hope you get that. It's we don't condone that sort of behavior. It's just a really wild, emotional roller coaster, man. And I hope that it creates some dialogue and also defines what rape is. We need to also figure that out, because you could say stop raping, but in some people's minds they imagine it being this like person in a dark alley jumping on someone, versus some of the means that Cosby took to take advantage of people.
Right, someone you trusted, or someone who has power over you, or whatever. The social dynamics are.
We need a proper gauge on what assault is. Like, universally, everybody has to be taught what that is. And I feel like people have taken advantage of people with the idea that I'm not this sort of person. I'm not Bill Cosby. I have not done this thing. When in fact you have taken advantage of someone. You have used your power to get things. You have, so that should help create some dialogue, and I hope it does. Yeah, so we need to talk about Cosby. See it if you can.
And that's coming this weekend. It debuts on Showtime, right?
First episode, I believe.
Yeah, first episode.
Yeah, we mentioned it earlier. Showtime does seem to be kind of doing that. They're doing like that weekly thing. We talked about it, I think a week or two ago, like with Yellow Jackets and Dexter. Like they're truly sticking to this once a week, trying to create a conversation, the water cooler talk kind of thing, like weekly, kind of make that go. So,
well, I mean, everyone was very positive on Dexter, but those other two shows you mentioned, Steve, those have been, I'm assuming this one will be. I just feel like people are going to be talking about it. But Yellow Jackets has been a water cooler show. You know what I mean? So it's like mission accomplished if that's what they're trying to do.
And that's the thing. You look at some of these things that actually catch on or build week over week, and you're like, okay, well, this is why that works. When you have the goods, it does work and it sustains it. And like a show like that really kind of swelled over the course of 2 months. Where you have some shows that are really incredible shows, but when they're all available, and I don't know where I fall in it now, because I shows like I always think of Stranger Things, because it's like that thing, the Netflix, these landmark shows that they have, they come out and like they burn so fast that like they're like what everyone talks about for precisely 7 days, and then it's like what happened.
And yet, you also feel like Stranger Things, I think the binge is part of my association with that. Like, I think of that as the show that, like, my family goes, all right, everybody, synchronize your watches, get hydrated.
Totally agree.
We're going to watch as many as we can before we crash. And when we get up in the morning, we're going to bang out some more. Like, so I do think there's something about it. Like, I don't want to see them lose that. But I do think that some of these shows, we've seen it too much with all these, the Marvel things, even the Star Wars stuff, that these shows, good or bad, the conversation lingers about them much more. I mean, it's the obvious effect of being weekly, but it's true. It really does work to give them a little bit more space in people's minds. But I feel like Stranger Things is the kind of show where I kind of want them to, maybe they'll do a broken in half season or something like they seem to like to do now. Like, have you seen Ozark yet, season 4?
No, I haven't watched it yet.
Yeah,
I saw that it was like part 1 and part 2, kind of broken it up.
And it's definitely, it ends at a good cliffhanger, but it feels like the middle of a season. It doesn't feel like the end of a short season. It feels like a story that would have had more completion if it were a season. So if you're an Ozark fan, there's definitely some big moves that happen in this batch of episodes. But it is like, I look to see when the next batch comes out, and they don't even have a date for it. And I was like, oh, that's kind of lousy, But I guess we're just going to have to accept that that's the way they want to do it now.
It's weird because like I don't know, before we get into the last show we're going to talk about, but it's interesting, like the Netflix of it all, just because of how much Netflix has been in the news this past week or so, like with their earnings report and like subscriber count coming in and like what's happening on the stock market. Like the more I think about Netflix, it is shows like looking forward, what does Netflix look like versus the last like 3 to 4 years? Because like we're talking about 2 shows that we just mentioned that are nearing the end of their run, in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
And what does Netflix have in terms of like their homegrown shows that are like that they would call like their brand, like the staples, like I don't know what the right word, like their landmark shows, like their the ones that people think of, and you think Ozark is definitely one of them, and it's at halfway through the final season that that's available. And like I think Stranger Things maybe has 2 seasons left, including the one coming up. And looking ahead, it's like a lot of the shows that are like their landmark shows. Like I guess the first thing that they kind of promote is like Squid Game, and these shows that they're giving like 2, 3, 4 seasons to don't seem to be as big as the shows that we are talking about, or like they don't really have the impact or like that ability to kind of like infiltrate the pop culture like some of these other shows have. So I'm very curious to see what the next couple of years look like at Netflix, like with these kinds of shows coming, like even like Narcos ending and like whatever those shows were of that like 5-year run where like there were these like really huge things. Obviously they're in the Mike Flanagan business, so that's exciting for some of that stuff coming out. But yeah, I don't know. Not that we're talking about Netflix on this podcast that much, but I do want to check out Ozark hopefully this weekend.
You always sneak in there, Netflix. We always end up talking about you anyway.
You can't not talk about the leader, I guess. Arguably the leader in this industry now, but
right.
But one service that is really doing some fun stuff is Hulu, and I think it's
nice
kind of
segue.
like we've kind of mentioned that a couple of times on the podcast. We've all kind of championed something that they've had recently, that has either gone under the radar or somehow has slowly built a real big, like Only Murders in the Building is a great example. That really kind of did that thing where they did, I think, a few episodes up front and doled out the rest of the season, and it really grew a fan base to the point that people were really excited for a second season. And they seem to be a network that really has kind of figured out how to program responsibly and kind of develop these shows that are really interesting. And the last show we're talking about is the new series that they have coming out called Pam and Tommy, which is from Craig Gillespie, I think directs the majority of the episodes. But I mean, when I first heard about this series, before we saw any pictures of them, before anything really, I mean, this is a moment in time, especially of our generation, mine and Ronald specifically. I mean, I don't know, we're not that different in ages, but like this was like a landmark event, not only because of who the 2 people were, but because of what this sex scandal, the sex tape scandal did for, for the porn industry, for actors, for actors, for privacy, for the internet, for all these things that were kind of like coming together at that time in history. So I was very interested in seeing what they had to say about the story beyond the sex tape itself, because that's really, I think, what the more interesting thing is. And then you start talking about like a cast with Seth Rogen and Lily James and Sebastian Stan and
Nick
Offerman, Taylor Schilling, just a really incredible cast. And I mean, Craig Gillespie's done this a couple times now. Like he did the I, Tonya film, which kind of went back to the Tanya Harding, Nancy Kerrigan event. And he's developing series for Hulu about Mike Tyson and also about like the Chippendales era of.
Oh my God. About that documentary that just came out. Have you seen that?
No, I haven't seen the doc, no, but he's doing like a series. I believe they're both at Hulu. But
you guys will love that doc.
What's the doc?
It's on Discovery Plus.
Okay, I have to find it.
Yeah, but
to say, like he's been doing these things where like they're taking these like, even Sebastian Stan was in I, Tonya, like these very specific events of the time, whether
Almost
it's
like
the 80s,
tabloid
90s.
stories.
Yeah,
like,
exactly. Good call. And not just looking at the like how saucy it was or like just how salacious it was, but really kind of getting into what it meant for everything around it, what it meant for the impacts that it had on the industries that touched it, whether it was a sporting industry in I, Tonya, or probably in what's to come in Iron Mike, but like specifically with this one, I've only seen the first 3 episodes, which is the 3 that come out today on Hulu that you can stream all at once. And then they're doing the thing with 1 a week. And I'm sure this will be a show, from what I've gathered, in my opinion so far, that people will be talking about for a variety of reasons. But
yeah,
my initial takeaway of the first 3 episodes really is this idea of like trying to explore the impact of what happened, not just about the sex tape itself, not just about how crazy that it was to happen, but like the moments that led up to it and what comes after it, but just like all the revolving parts that really touched it and that were affected by it, including Pam Anderson's, relationship, her career, like Tommy Lee. Like it's kind of crazy to kind of get perspective in a series like this, so far on Hulu, not to say anything against Hulu because I just championed them, but like you look to things like this and you hope that it has something to offer beyond just being a tabloidy type of TV series.
Mhm.
And personally, from the first 3 episodes, I'm very happy with like what it's done to try to like talk about the other stuff around it, like what's going on with these people, and including people that like I had no information on, like Seth Rogen's character I knew a little bit about, but like there's a lot of story there. And this is all kind of coming out of an article that was written that this whole series is based on. But I just think this is something that people are going to be talking about for the next couple of months as it airs. Especially like, you have somebody like Sebastian Stan, who is like the star of a Disney Plus series and of the Marvel universe. And this is like something that no one has ever seen him do or Lily James do. And it's like just completely out of their comfort zone. And I think that's amazing. And I think that's always fun to watch somebody be completely the opposite of what you expect them to be. And I think that's really, it's for everybody, even for Nick Offerman and Seth Rogen. I think it's like they're all doing something different. And that makes me really excited to see more of the show. And I'd be shocked if this isn't a show just right off the first 3 episodes that like could be a real like kind of Emmy contender for Hulu.
I mean, it's a great cast, and they all are doing amazing stuff. But the transformative sort of aspect, the physically transformative performance that Sebastian Stan and Lily James do, it's like it is in both cases a really solid piece of mimicry. Yeah. But it goes beyond mimicry, but it nails the mimicry so much so that you kind of have to remember at different points what the real person looks like. I don't know if you ever do that with this type of thing where you like stop and you go, oh yeah, I need to re-update my image of this story, but with the real people. Because Sebastian Stan is not like a tall, stringy guy like Tommy Lee at all. But when he's alone in the shot, he does a pretty good job of approximating the body language. When he's standing next to somebody, you can tell he's not tall like that. But the physicality, the body language, the way he's constantly like throwing his arms up and his tone. I mean, he goes from being a very comic character, kind of almost an antagonistic, villainous kind of comic character in the first episode, to a slightly more humanized guy as it goes along. And then you see the ways in which he is still kind of monstrous and a bit abusive in his own way, and then literally abusive, you find out a couple of details. But this story is not so much about all that as much as it is about, as you said, Steve, this moment in time when a celebrity sex tape came out of nowhere, and then the internet found a way to kind of meet these two things met in the middle, and the internet became the way that this thing got out to people. And then it also kind of, as the documentary, or not documentary, as the what do you call this kind of thing? It's not a docuseries, it's a biopic. It's not a biopic because it's not one person's story, but like I don't know how true the events of this series are as far as adhering to the facts, but as far as adhering to the spirit of the era, and when you see the internet come along and how that kind of becomes this way of just broadcasting to the whole world, you see the characters in this. There's a little bit of that, people saying oh, telephones, that'll never catch on, in a period piece. But it goes beyond that, because it really is like, you sort of forget that you couldn't really fathom what the internet was before the internet came along. And so you see how like sex and the internet are kind of meeting in this thing. And then this whole idea of the celebrity sex tape, years later, it would become like a common thing. And the assumption would be that the people involved had created this for the purpose of leaking it and making money on it or getting hype from it. This is the beginning of that, though. And I keep saying documentary. I've got to, and the show, because we've said documentary so much in this episode. But the show really does. It's like, it really does feel like it's splitting the difference between being kind of a fun, trashy thing, and then honestly connecting with the real human cost of this kind of commodifying of people's lives and of sex. And definitely Pam Anderson comes out of this as the sort of heart of the thing. Yeah. As good as Sebastian Stan is, and as fun as he is to watch as Tommy Lee, and as entertaining as the Nick Offerman and Seth Rogen side of the story is, it's almost like a Coen Brothers level, like, bumbling crooks kind of thing. I don't know. When you get to some of those scenes, Lily James really carries it very well. When it gets to the point where the humanity of Pam Anderson is the subject of the show, and you realize how much you've been maybe not thinking about that in your life or culturally, but also the show is very cagey. Like, it starts off with the people who steal the tape, and then it takes you deeper into the story. And it's funny to realize, oh, I was kind of amused by this in the first episode. And as it gets further and further, you realize how unamusing it would be to have your life invaded this way. And also, for her in particular, the show does a pretty good job of positioning this idea that she was at a point in her career where, especially as a woman, being suddenly seen only as a sex object, which was something she was fighting already. I don't know what perfect world we would live in where Barbed Wire would have been like a massive box office hit and would have cemented her stardom. But there's no question that it hurt her career, that at the moment when she was making her big screen play, she suddenly had to answer questions about a sex tape, And the show really deals with that idea that, as bad as it might be for Tommy Lee to have his privacy invaded, it's not as hard for a man in our culture to have to deal with these questions. It's not as devalidating as, like, oddly, we kind of high-five a guy for doing something like this, and then we shame a woman, or at least our culture is sort of set up on those puritanical ideas. So, the show deals with all that, but honestly, in the opening episodes, you're going to laugh and your jaw's going to drop at different things. It is a highly entertaining spectacle that does. I don't know if you felt the same thing, Ronald, like midway into the run of the show, it gets heavy in a way that you can't avoid.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, when they had a moment that I consider jumping the shark, I almost gave up on it. Once I got over it, and you see now seeing the whole thing and seeing how nuanced and well done it was done, it was put together. I wish that scene that I'm talking about just wasn't in the movie.
Are you talking about maybe a famous scene? One of the scenes people will be talking about.
People will be talking. Yeah, the scene that everybody will be talking.
That has a guest voice actor in it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No, it's a big swing. Boy, I know that sounds like a pun now that we know what the episode is.
Yeah.
But it is. It really is a big swing. Like, that scene really is there to do a very specific thing, and I think maybe it builds on the characterization that we've been dealing with. But I agree with you. It's sort of a showy, flashy scene that really does feel like, oh, whatever is grounded and human about this story has kind of momentarily left the building.
And it does a couple of things. Like, it does exactly what you're talking about. Like, it really does differentiate, like the experience of a man who goes through this and a woman that goes through this. But also, there's a lot of nuance in, like, how, like, consent. So it does it a couple ways. It shows you, and then it tells you, which I really loved, right? Because, like, a lot of stuff just tells you a lot, right? It's like, this is wrong. This is wrong. You need to rethink this. This is wrong. But it shows you like 10 times. And then towards the end, people go on like a final rant about why this is awful. But that is a big message that really needs to be emphasized. The way that you get information really does make a difference in how the other person's affected. If somebody purposefully produces a sex tape to put out, to be sold, right? That's very different than someone's private video being taken and sold. That is a very big difference. And
Yeah.
I think in today's society, there's been kind of this thing where like, well, it's out in the world, it doesn't matter. They never should have shot it. Should you maybe not have made, like, should you not have shot baby pictures, or should your parents not have shot you as a kid naked on the bed? You know what I mean? Like that's nothing to be discussed. That's like private things that are in your family that just should not be distributed. You know, when you're a baby and somebody takes you know what I mean? Like these are private.
You can't criticize, like,
right.
Some decisions people are making behind, in their private lives have nothing to do with anybody but them and those involved. It's kind of like those things.
And the context changes when it gets outside of you. People get very cold and callous about other people's information getting out. And I think that's so fucking crazy. This does a really good job. I mean, and I know some of that stuff was like kind of heavy-handed, but I specifically remember my dad was a computer programmer. So like we didn't have the most money, but like he would get computers from work and bring them in. And we were very early on the internet. I specifically remember people talking about these things very similarly to this movie. Not even like exaggerating. Like, what is this? Like, what does it do? Like, phone? Like, I remember all of that talk. I remember it, and it's a lot less exaggerated than I thought it would be. I thought that it would be like kind of goofy, like Austin Powers. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I thought it would be that kind of I think it's a little more grounded than people remember about how people talked about sex tapes, the internet, the distribution of it. And this is the last thing I'll say. When I was younger, I had a technology teacher that told me this, and I thought it was so fucking weird when he would say it. It's like 2000. He's like, porn moves technology forward. Don't ever think it's any other way. Every time you watch a commercial and it's like Comcast, they talk about porn in commercials in very subtle ways. Porn is everywhere, and it moves things forward. It puts things in the houses. It changed the way we stream videos. Porn is king. It changed DVDs were distributed differently because of it. Tapes, everything. And it is really interesting that there's some acknowledgement of that through this through this thing, because it is a real thing. I know like people are very like crass. Oh, that's very clutching their pearls about it, but porn moves things forward. That's right. Yeah, it's a strange.
It's even interesting, like in the episode where they're like kind of shopping the tape, there's like a very strong, you can kind of see the delineation in like how the industry, when they're going to like the big players in the industry and they're kind of getting the door shut in their face. The way they approach these things versus like once the internet was around, or once the internet became a player, you realize that like their feet were being held to the fire, and it was like, okay, well, we have to like do something with this now, because we can't, like what you're saying, basically, the kind of pushing technology forward. In this case, it probably did help push it forward, and and vice versa. It kind of forced an industry to change, just like technology has done to so many types of industries. But it's kind of crazy to get that kind of perspective on it when you see them going to like the big name players in the porn industry and being denied because of like, signatures and like just waivers, and like they're getting very legally schmigally, and they're like, oh well, he's like looking for that part, and the guy mentions the internet, and it's like, well, fuck the internet. I don't need anything. You know what I mean? Like they're just like, let's just go. It's crazy to think about like how much of like it was the wild west. Like even at that time, and like what things could be found. And it's like, it's even just like you mentioning, your dad's involvement and the front of it, and like just remembering people talking about the early days of the internet and like the kind of laughing it off in some ways, a certain people. I can vividly remember the same, just like adults, like, that were against getting computers in my family, like, oh, that's not gonna fit. What are you talking about? But then you think about like this thing became what it was, that we're talking now, 20 plus years later, 25 years later, you know, and to think, you know, and to circle back a little bit, talking about Euphoria earlier in the episode, and to think about, you know, the internet and social media and like what things do now when they leak. And, you know, if you're a student and some picture gets out that you sent somebody and, you know, in private, you know, things like that get out, especially when you're of an age like where you're not really fully developed as a human being yet, and what that can do to you and affect you. Like those things are just really heavy, you know, and to think about, you know, this show and, you know, the impact that it had on people at that point in time, really all parties involved, really, even beyond Pam and Tommy, but mainly them and mainly Pam. It's just, you know, it's crazy. It's a good takeaway, I think. And I think it's cool that this series is kind of like, you know, not just sticking to the fun, entertaining piece that we kind of mentioned the first couple episodes, definitely feels the settle into. Because then when that third episode kicks, I feel like it kind of shifts a lot. And you really get a lot of like the Pam experience of what is about to happen to her. And it just is really devastating. And
the sense of dread is legit, like the dramatic sense of dread they create, because you see how close they're getting to finding out about it, you know, and then when they find out about it, then you see the ripple effect and how like they know it, yet like they're like, oh, maybe this will just go away, you know, and it's continuing to grow. So no, and even if it is like, I guess my whole point about the accuracy of it before, even if it is like creating a shorthand around some characters or events to make you understand it, I do think these issues are what you'll be thinking about. And I mean, you said it right up top when we started talking about this topic, Steve. Maybe that's why you did it at the top, because it was a topic. But like the fact that like
the root of the word.
Yeah, right. Once again, the root of the word. Was that when we were recording, or was that before the recording?
I don't know.
Yes, I like to emphasize the root of words. But just this idea that like this is, it's going to be kind of fun. It's going to hit that sort of torn from the headlines kind of thing. But there's a, what is this about? The about of this is something I haven't seen before. Right. You know, like I haven't seen anything wrestle with those particular issues. The way it ties in misogyny in our culture, and the way it ties in the history of just like kind of what you're saying, Ronald, the way that porn is like one of those secret economies. It's like we always talk about movie grosses, but like porn grosses and video game grosses, and you know, there's all these other little economies in the entertainment industry that are really huge and
just completely overshadow like box office.
Right, and you don't really talk about it that much. Right, but this show kind of tries to grapple with that the rise of that, and how the internet has made it so ubiquitous that all you got to do is type in a phrase and it's all right there.
It's crazy that like that tape took, the distribution of it was a little nuts, right?
Yeah.
We could text each other that tape now. Like it could,
like,
in one crazy text could be the entire duration of that. It's beyond my understanding. You know, I understand it, but it's beyond my understanding how quickly, once it caught fire, like streaming things and distribution of files caught on, it didn't take very much for it to evolve the way that it did.
Yeah.
And seeing the collateral damage of it is the most devastating part. It's just seeing like what could have been with Pam Anderson, and you know, it's
sad.
I hope that she gets another chance. Like I love what's been happening with TV and long form storytelling. I'd love to see her in like a cool action, TV show on Netflix or Hulu or Apple TV Plus or something like that. How cool would that be, man? But it's devastating to see, a person that you can see has withdrawn from the light because of, she's been hurt.
Yeah.
She's been burned by the industry. Sad stuff, man.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's Hulu this weekend. First 3 episodes drop, and then a weekly drop after that.
Yes.
Pam and Tommy.
Pam and Tommy.
I want to tell you the name of that. Go, sir.
I was like crazy, like transformation shit, like the makeup,
so good.
All that stuff in this is just phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you gotta send me that you have that doc.
Yeah, it's called Curse of the Chippendales.
Okay.
Oh, I feel like this
Steve,
That name
sounds
is familiar.
familiar. Okay.
John,
Yeah.
Curse of the Chippendale. You
All right,
will
I'll
not
watch it.
regret watching this crazy doc.
Well, I can't find out for sure if this series. I'm trying to see the Craig Gillespie one because I know that Dev Patel is involved in a Chippendales movie or series that's being developed too, and I don't know if it's the same thing. But
Dev
like,
Patel?
it's crazy. Like Dev Patel.
So I
I
wonder
think
if...
Kamal Nanjiani's in it, and the guy from White Lotus, Armand from White
Oh.
Lotus.
Yes,
So-
yes. I
So
read about
who's
that.
so one of the
That's what I heard.
guys in the
Yeah.
in the whole situation is Indian. So I'm wondering if one of them, I bet Kumail's gonna be that guy. Cause that guy is like, oh God, when you find out what this guy does, man, so good. So good. Such a good doc.
Okay, so this is so he's in a film. So Dev is in a film. I think the
Okay.
Craig Gillespie thing is a series. So there
Okay.
might be
Or
two
as I
different
call it,
things.
a doc. I just call all
Or
television.
doc. Yeah.
A doc. It should be called that though.
Yeah, Dev plays Steve Banerjee.
That's the guy.
Yeah, that's the guy.
Holy shit. That's gonna be God. They have footage of this guy.
And I think you said, and then Seth Rogen's in it, Elle Fanning's in
Seth
it,
Rogen's
Miles
in
in it. Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
But yeah, I don't know. Oh wait. Oh, it is it is Craig Gillespie. It's a movie, not a series. So it is Craig Gillespie making this.
And Kumail's gonna be Steve.
No. Dev Patel is Steve.
Dev Patel's gonna be Steve?
Yeah, and I think
Oh
Kamal may also be in this movie.
He should use that physique for something.
Right. Oh my God, this is gonna be so good, man.
Yeah, Kamal to play Chippendale's. Oh my God! So this is so confusing. Okay, two different things.
Mhm.
Oh,
Chippendale's movie that Craig Gillespie is directing with Dev Patel,
okay.
Seth Rogen, and Elle Fanning. Dev is playing Steve Banerjee.
Okay.
Kumail is also in a Chippendales series on Hulu playing Steve Banerjee, separate from the
Okay.
movie.
I think
Bigger one.
I'm more into the Hulu one. Because I think
And the series is going to be called Immigrant.
Oh. Why would they? Okay. Interesting.
Wow, such a weird thing. Yeah, and like the producer of Pam and Tommy is producing Kamal's series.
Oh.
Kumail
I
makes
guess
more
there's a
sense
lot to
for
talk
me.
about with Chippendales. I don't know.
Yeah,
I gotta watch
yeah.
this doc.
You gotta
Yeah.
watch the doc. You will get it. You'll get why they want to do it. You'll absolutely get it.
Okay, cool. Well,
Yeah.
recap real quick. So yeah, Pam and Tommy Hulu this weekend. We need to talk about Cosby is on Showtime, and then we have Euphoria, obviously HBO proper Sunday nights, also on HBO Max, and The After Party is on Apple TV Plus. So 4 bits of newness if you included Euphoria, all coming out this weekend, and all that we were able to check out and talk about. This has been a really fun episode, man.
Yeah. This is
Very
fun,
very
man.
topical, all new
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
Good stuff, man. Good stuff.
I think the drinking game this week was every time we said heavy.
Yeah, probably.
Probably.
Somebody is passed out right now. Somebody's just pooping their pants. People don't talk about that enough.
What, poop in their pants?
Yeah, man. Like there's not a lot of benefits of being drunk. One of them is you could poop your pants.
I thought you meant people just. I thought you were about to say there's not a lot of benefits to pooping your pants. And I argue there is one benefit.
That's they don't talk about that enough.
There's exactly one. All right. On that note, let's just leave that image.
Great episode, guys. This ended on a poop pants
On a poop.
conversation.
Yeah.
Classic movie schmovie.
Yep.
So after you're done pooping your pants, head to movieschmovie.com.
Yeah.
All the episodes are there. You can jump off to any of our social media pages, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, any of them. It's all there. And you can subscribe to whichever podcast platform you prefer to listen to your podcast in, right from that page as well. And again, we're on Facebook. The podcast streams on Facebook now. The day it comes out, it's automatically there if you follow the Facebook page. You can automatically see it in your feed if you'd like to just listen to it there. That's one of the newer, I guess, features that Facebook has for podcast pages, which is pretty slick. But again, schmovie.com. And if you do subscribe anywhere, please, if you can leave a rating, review, a star rating, whatever it is. And if not, there's probably a share button somewhere in that app. If you can hit share and send it to one person
please do
that you think might like the episode, we would all really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Do you guys have anything else you'd like to say before we head out today?
Look up the show The Cleaning Lady on Fox. It's a really promising show. Yeah. It's about 3 episodes in.
Curse of the Chippendales and Cleaning Lady.
And The Cleaning Lady. Check that out, please.
Got it. John, are you good?
I started watching Archive 81 on Netflix.
I need to watch that.
I need to watch that.
I've heard that's really good.
Yeah. But then the zombie show's coming out. The Korean zombie show's coming out this Friday. It's called like If I'm Dead or something like that, or Kill Me When I'm Dead or something weird.
Oh yeah,
like
yeah.
That's supposed.
I'm trying to stay away from anything Archive 81 because I feel like I don't want anything.
Yeah.
A lot of the marketing for it now I've seen popping up now that it's kind of caught on is like stay away, don't get spoiled.
Okay.
Right.
Protect the twist or the whatever. So
okay.
So that's a tell that Netflix has a show that's catching on is that you start to see marketing for it.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And I've started to see like ads pop up for it on the internet randomly. So I think they know I want to watch it. So I was like, thanks guys. All right, so I'll have to check that out for sure. All right, cool. Well, we'll talk to you guys next week. And as always, you've made our day. Thanks.
Bye.